Good evening, everyone. Welcome from Poet's Choice. Namaste. We are glad to have you here tonight. I'd like to welcome Mark Tochen. Just a minute. I'm just adding him to the event today. Hello.
Hello.
Namaste. Hi.
Namaste.
So let's begin with the event with a short introduction about you, shall we? So, Mark Tochen, for the audience basically who are here with us tonight. Mark Tochen is the author of two of our books, Desires, as well as A Fleeting Visitor. And one of the book is on the way. It's called Realm of Emotions. This is the first book, and this is our other book, Desires. So, starting with an introduction, Mark Tochen has traveled to more than 10, or actually lived in more than 10 US states. Is that right? That's quite a...
Yes, all over the United States.
Wow. So let's begin with that. What's it been like? The whole journey would be something of a telltale and something really worth sharing with the people over here.
Well, as a child, my parents moved to 3 different states. So as my father's work took him there, and then I went from the Northeast to the Southeast, from New York to Atlanta, and then I went to college in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then I went to medical school back in Tennessee, and then I went to Boston for training, and then I was drafted by the U.S. Navy during the Vietnamese War, as we call it, or the American War, as the Vietnamese call it, and spent 2 more years doing that. And then we moved to the West Coast, where my wife's family lives, and we happily lived in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, except for 2 years in Texas. The rest of the time in the Northwest for the last 40 years.
Wow, that's quite a journey. So you say that you started writing at the age of 12. So actually your travels and your writing seem to be somewhat interconnected from what I read about you. So can you shed some light on that, as in is it something to do with your life experiences and your emotions with the changing locations where you moved from one place to the other?
You mean the writing?
Yes.
Well, I will, if I may, I will give you my quatrain I wrote when I was 12, thinking of my grandmother standing in her room. She was very quiet in her last years and very sad. And I stood in her room and I was thinking, how can I connect with her? And what do we share in common? And my very first verse popped into my head with no effort at all. If you be I and I be you, what would you be that I be too?
Wow, that's amazing. That's really...
So I was trying to connect with her essence in her bedroom. And I wrote a little bit through high school, and a friend of mine who's a writer said, looks like high school poetry.
Wow.
Then it got a little better in college, got published in some school literary magazines, and then I went to medical school, which is another world from writing, from literature, from the warm friendliness of English professors. Very different.
That's how it evolves, I believe. Writing, you just first just pick up the pen and start writing, and then it's like the growing stages from one stage to the other, and then it evolves. But before that, we have Jeremiah Valentine here, who incidentally is also currently with the US Navy and happens to be one of our published poets. His book is called It's Not About You. So, since you have served the US Navy during the Vietnamese War, it is the connect basically. That's why I'm sharing this bit. So, Um, with, what do you mean by serving the US Navy? Were you serving as a pediatrician or was it something?
I was still I had finished 2 years. I wasn't a fully trained
Oh,
pediatrician. So there's something called general medical officer. You just took care of everybody, everything that came in the door.
oh, interesting. That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, uh, so shall we hear your poems? Which one will you like to recite first?
Well, a few comments, if I may, and then I'd like to start with the first thing I had published with you from Desires.
Okay.
I want to thank you, Mr. Santayo, for hosting this reading and for the invitation to appear. Poet's Choice has been a delightful partner. You publish such insightful books and so beautifully presented. And I wish to thank you and all your editors. You're all very professional and yet most courteous. And I appreciate the interaction and I appreciate the opportunity to have my voice heard.
Thank you so much. It's most touching to hear such praises and compliments coming from our poets. It's always encouraging for us to work harder and better.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank all the listeners for sitting in. I hope that what the listeners will take away is that, like your life, my life is many parts, and I hope that I have written about them well. So I'll begin. My name is Mark. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a husband, a father, and a grandfather, a pediatrician, and a writer. Each role requires preparation, production, and passion. To each part, I must bring love. Writing enables my voice to share that love. The last and greatest of the things I call myself is a partner to my cherished wife, Helen, who's by my side just out of the camera. She is my partner in all, my companion in all, and her diagnosis of Alzheimer's 5 years ago altered our life and made me write more as I had more to say. Let me present poems to you from my perspective on love as a father, a grandfather, a writer, and a husband. First, the two poems published first by Poet's Choice in the book Desires is called A Prayer, a Wish for My Wife. Oh, my dear, be restored to yourself, but it won't happen on this plane of existence. This I know in my head, if not my heart. In heaven you will be whole and honored and welcomed at the gates. Maybe I'll be there cap in hand and deservedly chastened, but as sounds the sonorous Hebrew prayer at the end of the Day of Atonement, the gates are closing. The second poem is from the Poet's Choice book, A Fleeting Visitor, and I would like to read from that book a poem called Got Skin in This Game. I met an old man for the first time today. I hadn't realized I knew him intimately. Whose hand is this? I'd like to know its provenance. Oh my, it seems to be attached to my wrist. Oh my, it's mine. Wrinkled skin, not taut and ready. Looks so feeble and old. Funny, this old thing could be attached to someone who doesn't feel old at all. Powerless to change bad things, yes. But old, wrinkled, flaccid skin? No way.
Amazing. I really caught on this line of your first poem, a prayer, a wish for my wife, and that's the last line. The gates, the gates are closing. Can you shed some light on that? What do you actually experience or feel when you're saying the gates are closing?
Well, I'm Jewish, and in Jewish religion, the holiest day of the year is the Day of Atonement, when you atone for your sins. And at the end of that day, the choices are made as who will be permitted to enter heaven and who will not. The gates that are closing are the heavenly gates, and you better get your affairs in order before they close, because if you don't, you're on the outside and you will not reach heaven.
Hey, that's pretty deep and really, really enlightening. For our viewers to understand this, it needs a repetition of uh, the whole the whole thing that you just shared with us. I understand it because I have the spiritual angle to myself, and I connect with what you just said. And about the second poem, it's again seems to be written putting yourself in your wife's position, or maybe should I say your role playing. Is that true? I might be wrong here. It's just my way of looking at the poem. That
Well, she looks great. I don't think I do. For example, I chose a turtleneck to hide my neck and things like that. But I feel like inside every older person, there's the younger person who is looking through the lens of this elderly frame that we suddenly occupy. And I was taking a nap, which I do more of now than I used to. And in the half light of the afternoon, I looked at my hand and I honestly didn't recognize it. What is that apparition?
okay. So after this, do you would you like to share with the audience about the poem that you have coming in the next book, that is the Realm of Emotions, which will be the name of the book? You have a poem called Tiny Touch of Hope. Would you like to share the poem with the
Well,
audience?
I don't have it in my prepared comments because I knew it was in an upcoming book.
It's an upcoming project, but yes, I still proposed it because it could be interesting for the audience to relate with this stream of thought. I related with all your work and everything I read about you, that it has a common point string attached to it, and that is the voice that you said in your introduction. You need a voice to you have a voice to a need to express about relationships and the links that you made throughout your life. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I just got the feeling of you, and then you said that I have migrated from, all your life, like in your growing up here from one place to another. It seems to me that this has something to do with your interest towards poems. You need to find someone to express how you actually felt, and to be finding some people to uh, relate with it. Is that true?
I think so. My wife, there's the expression that your wife is your better half. I think my wife is my better three quarters. She anything that I can offer to Helen, I offer, and it doesn't ever match what she offers to me every day.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we'll like to know how has it been with you when you mentioned that you traveled a lot pre-COVID times, but then after post-COVID you've started writing more, and you've in the last 1 year you've written much more than how much you might have written before. So how has that your journey been through the past 1 year as a poet?
well, I guess the writer's impulse surfaces, and I certainly knew, and I consider myself a little bit of a writer even in high school. Um, through the years of my medical training and practice, 40 years of practice, there's not a lot of time. I wrote, but I have a tiny collection. I called it the Practice Years. It's only got 10 or 12 things in it, some poems and a couple of short stories. The whole thing's not 20 pages long. Everything else I looked at and discarded. It was awful. I mean, it might be interesting to an anthropologist, but not to a writer or a reader. So, so I have a
Okay.
few things only. I wrote a little bit. I had I had some poems published in medical journals. Sometimes they keep one little scrap of space if they solicit poems. So it's not like with someone with the acumen of you and your staff, but I got a few poems published that way. And in our medical group had its own literary magazine for a while. That had a pretty low standard of entry as well. But I haven't done any real writing. The last year, some close friends who are writers have been my sounding boards, and they're quite expert, and they guided me through. I've written about 200 pages of poetry this year, and about 200 pages for a journal I call the Journal for Helen, just recording our journey across time.
Interesting. I had I to the audience here, I'd like to share that I also write myself. And in the two books that were published with Mark, that is Desires and A Fleeting Visitor, I did write the back cover of the books. So you might want to have a look at that. I did spend quite a bit of time to put the words together. In the book Desires, I speak of the four quadrants of life, which is called the Ashrams of Life. It's it's something I really came up with while designing the book, and that is why the four boxes are there in the front cover, and then the four stages of life, you can say, are explained in the back cover. That is, the first one is the puberty, midlife crisis, penance, and then it's memory reset. That's how I've actually put the four ashrams of life. And coming back, any questions? I don't see any questions coming from our audience here so far. But if anybody has any questions, I'd encourage them to put it across so that we can ask Mark to answer them. So, whilst that is happening, I would like to know from you how and learn from you how are you stress. You've seen that you stress a lot on your relationships, and your poems have a lot with the compassion and the love of complying and developing relationships, whether it is your wife, whether it is your children and grandchildren, children. Uh, Anything that you would like to say about that there is a certain measure of value and importance that you give to your relationships, even in your poems, like the one that you've submitted in Desires talks about how it impacts you with your wife suffering from Alzheimer's. And in the second one, like we saw, there is again a glimpse of um that coming out, how the relationships have affected you.
Well,
Am I so? If I'm able to get across to you, so your relationships hold a lot of importance for you in your life. So, is there some sort of a message or something which you'd like to give? And today I realize the people tend to devalue or not give that much value to relationships that one possesses. The ones that they develop, they tend to make more out of it. But when those that they have already established with them, they take them for granted. So this must be something which I find that you might be able to put some, say something about to the audience here, that which is there in your work. I can see it in your work. That is something I really appreciate about your work. So, do you have something to say about that?
thank you. Yeah, I'd like to read some short poems that are directed at my meeting my wife, our children, grandson, and they're just four short poems. So if I may read those, I think that's better than just something I might say. The uh, the first poem is really like a group of gestures, and it's called Courtship. First meeting, hearing her step, turning and looking. She is lovely. The feeling when I first saw her. Without money, we explored the city, the greenways and banks along the Charles. Mushy snowballs scooped from the winter shore, spattered and disintegrated against her long red coat. Talked and walked miles along a rocky Maine coast. Never noticed the rocks, only that she was there. Elegant seafood house, no lobster that night, 2 bowls of chowder, all I could afford. Marriage talk, new vocabulary, sounds good, want to get fluent. Her sister with husband, an 8-year-old son, here to check me out. Twirled that boy around, both of us laughing. His parents thought I passed. Wedding day, like cliff diving. Traffic made me late to my own wedding. Oh my. She took me anyway. At 50 years, she kept me anyway. And the second poem is on our daughter's birthday. This is dedicated to Naomi. Who is this girl, our daughter? You artist, designer, educator, teach us to soar with you. Take us flying through the blue skies that beckon and arch above this mundane world as we share love with you and join with joyful show the gay spirit that we all know. And the third of this little foursome, my son reminded me recently that when he was little, I called him Son One. This is addressed to
Okay.
by Son One, dedicated to Dan. Who is this boy, our son, now a man named Dan? The most beautiful baby boy, laughing in delight as he sets adoring eyes on his big sister, 2 years older. Little prince of mischief, climbing and hiding in a tree, slated to be cut down, protesting its fate as Dad frantically searches the yard and house for him. Tiring of his ring bearer role in his uncle's wedding, he hides in a closet, fancy duds and all, until a snicker undoes him. You are the runner with the ruse. Excuse me.
Yeah.
You are the runner with the ruse on an Aussie back road, the buddy of the sulfur-crested cockatoo. and the player on your viola for the little kids in Sunday school. And the fourth of this cluster is A Year in the Rear View Mirror, written April 22nd, 2021, dedicated to Carter, our grandson, on his first day back at school because of COVID. A grandson stands framed in the open doorway of the car as he exits and turns at his mom's behest for a picture. Behind him, a school bus, yellow as the hope of morning sun on the day, the first school day of the year. He's lean in his sleeveless tee and jeans and handsome, we know, under the gray pandemic mask, carrying a well-rested backpack. Despite a teen's habitus, there is uncertainty in those shoulders, hunched forward, and even in the whirl of hair, uncut for a year. And the pandemic picture could bear a caption reading, First School Day in a Year.
Interesting.
I would like to read one word that sort of connects with our evolving relationship, we were helping as volunteers a bunch of parents who were putting some things together for our grandson's school last year, and we were by far the oldest people in the room. And our hostess, a lovely lady named Lai, asked a question that becomes the title of this poem. Have you renewed your vows? With thanks to Lai, who asked. The question was simple to the very senior couple in the room. How long have you been married? The response, 50 and a half years. Then a following question. Have you renewed your vows? The answer comes clear. Yes, every day, in every way, thinking of that question, have we renewed our vows? Oh yes, we have renewed our vows by every smile and embrace shared. Of course we have renewed our vows. By long walks hand in hand, singing praise, our spirits raise as we pace together in every weather. Have we renewed our vows? Oh yes, we have renewed our vows. When I sing off key to you as we stroll, and the neighbors smile in benediction. Oh yes, we renew our vows as we walk singing and laughing into tomorrow, darkest skies or sparkling sun. We too are one.
Beautiful. So that fulfills your granddaughter's, I think,
Well,
question.
grandson. We have one grandson.
Naomi Mori, is that your
Our
granddaughter?
daughter. Yeah, Naomi is our daughter, Dan is our son, and Carter is our grandson.
Yes, so she had asked we would like to hear our grandfather's poems. So you recited a few poems. Then we have one question from Mr. Sonthalia, that's my father here. When do you plan to visit Mumbai? India?
You know, it would be a great pleasure. We have heard stories of India from a daughter-in-law who, in work she has done, nonprofit work, has visited India many times and has described it. And we've had other friends who traveled in India. It would be an honor and a pleasure. When COVID and our infirmities permit, we would be delighted.
You're most welcome to stay with me. That is an open invitation. Whenever you are here, you can contact me.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I try to divide up poems into sort of little topics. So that was our family one. But I have some attempts at humor. Sometimes I think it's our grandson who says, Gungun, that's grandpa humor. But anyway, that's all I've got. So if I may read a bit more.
Oh, please continue. We love to listen to you. We're really enjoying your pieces.
Thank you. This is from a kind of poem or poetic exercise called a poem recipe. And I recently took a writer's workshop, and I thought the instructor was so clever when he described the poem recipe to us. Later I found out it's a well-known technique. But the idea is you take the 5 traditional senses. Actually, there are more than 5, but usually we hear of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Write an image or a memory that ties in with that, write them down, and then make a poem out of it. And it gives you a topic when you didn't have one. So I tried that. This is called Morning Stirrings, and the ingredients are sight, a kestrel circling the sky for mice; sound, the hoo-hoo of a mourning dove searching for a mate; taste, spicy chili crisp, paste of red chilies mixed with fried onions; touch, the soft palm of your spouse stroking a query in early morning; smell, whole bean dark roast coffee in the morning. A
That
kestrel
one.
soars so graceful, so deadly to small scurrying animals in the grass, and ignores the hoo-hoo of a mourning dove in Quaker gray pecking in the dirt. The hoo-hoo is for you, if you'll be his mate. In the dirt, the male dove finds a spicy treasure, hotter than his hoo-hoo. To you know hoo-hoo. Leftover Chinese takeout, tossed on the ground from a takeout dish full of rockfish, but the sauce is spicy chili crisp, fried onions, and hot to the taste, though not to the dove's taste. His hoo-hoo sounds like roo. He's not being effortlessly fed in a zoo. The kestrel soars oblivious. Nobody sauced his mice or squirrel, pray, and he eats well every day. And hold the hot sauce, please. While out the window looks a man in early dawn, awakened by a soft touch from his wife's palm on his shoulder. Are you up, my dear? Please make some coffee and bring it to me. Here. His slippers squelch to the kitchen as the chocolate dark roast speaks to his sleepy gaze. I don't want to boast, but I'll have you awake before you make your toast.
Okay, so that was a epiphora poem as I see it, the rhyme scheme, and it's really has humor in it. That's the smell part of it made me want to have coffee. And I also thought about what about the sixth sense? You had the 5 senses. What about the
Oh,
sixth sense?
yes, I think that's a higher
Intuition.
order. I'll work up to that.
Yeah.
Then I have another attempt at grandpa humor. A
Go
close
ahead, go
friend,
ahead.
a close friend of our daughter's is a very good artist, and she and I have done some art and poetry collaborations. She's now calling what we do visual poems. She's a much better artist than I am a writer, but she sent me a picture of a gloomy giant evergreen tree at dusk with the mist swirling around. At the bottom she wrote, I went looking for an owl, but I heard a frog. And I said to myself, I can work with that. So I wrote a poem. Froggy went a-courtin'. If you had an owl in mind and heard instead a croaking frog, maybe you left the trees behind and stepped in error into a bog. Look down if your feet are wet. That you stepped into a bog is a very good bet. And if you still hear a frog, better watch out. It's mating time. And if no female frog gives some respite, without reason or rhyme, your croaking guy may get desperate and dear lady chase you over hill and dale. Then if the owl goes hoot, go find your own female, Froggy will say, I've already got my loot.
Interesting. When you said visual poems, that struck me. That was the name of my submittable form, which I had floated for a book that I published. It's called The
Oh,
Inner Eye.
how beautiful.
So, yeah, it had visuals in it. It had the actual representation of the poems created visually in it. Yes, I don't have it right now with me over here. Otherwise, I would have shown it to you.
Oh, that's lovely. I well, actually, if I could, I have a poem that's kind of a romance. Some dear friends came to visit us in the Northwest. They live in the Northeast, and we hadn't seen each other in years. And we took them to the Oregon coast, which is a very lovely coastline, and had a wonderful time together. And then I wrote a slightly beach-themed thing called The Land of Best. Where I live, there's a land called Best. We'll skip the rest, good and better, when we can go right to best. In this land, there is no fright, as unleashed dogs frolic about on a safe sandy beach, speaking the susurration of the surf. In this land, I'd never fight. All races, all ages welcome me with a wave, as walking together on the sand, we shed our sandals on a driftwood spur. In this land I find serene, we write poetry together in laughing rhymes and graceful lines. All are rich in caring and sharing. A yearning heart challenges me to accept the kindness that rules in this land, trusting my feeling that the land is true. But how am I to stand in this land of joy when my heart is yet unhealed, bruised by the only life I've known, and accept this land of bliss where naught is ever amiss and the golden sun of morning shines through the sun. In this land I live a dream, but this land is gone when I awake and reappears only in my sleep.
That's dreamy, to be precise. I mean, it's like living the day in the present as it comes, and then reminiscing at the same time. Oh, that day has gone past already. It's really catching the moment really well. I felt it. That's how I expressed what I actually gathered out of your poem.
Thank you. Then connected with the beach theme, here's a tiny one called Tides of Time. The tides of time swirl the sandy shore of our lives, leaving only the remnants of what we were.
Oh, that's it. That's a really short one. Interesting.
And then on an American theme, I wrote a little poem on the 4th of July. My wife and I had a lovely time walking around a local lake where everyone was out on the lake and picnicking, and it was lovely. The 4th of July is the American Independence Day, July 4th, 1776, when the Republic was declared. And the bicentennial was July 4th, 1976, and we're 45 years past that date. So this is called a prose poem. It's called Sally Forth, It's the 4th. Happy 4th of July, 2021. Fireworks banned for fire risk. Huzzah, huzzah, it's July the 4th in the South and in the North. Spread the word, it's no longer the 3rd, it's the 4th. It's fun all day for picnics and play, and we preen and pose for pics, kayaks and paddleboards and fishing poles, but skip the swimming in the green lake of blooming algae. No more jumping off the bridge. We've had enough of drowning, beautiful teenagers. Enough of commemorative corsages and loving notes posted on the railing. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. It's more like Bilbo and Frodo playing in the Shire as the sun in a blue sky rises higher and higher, and every smiling but too white face is no longer sheltering in place as little kids around us race, and frabjous joy, no fireworks this holiday. We're safe this jolly day, this play and folly day. It's the 4th.
Now that you brought that up, Mark, I'd like to ask you, because few people here may not have experienced this. You shared that you experienced the Vietnamese war, the American war, that lasted for about 20 years, I think. So, what was it like? Actually, we don't really have any idea about the whole the whole affair that took place during those 20 years, it must have been really tough. The times that went through, uh, what was it like?
During which years, Akshay?
That was from 1955 to 1975, right? That was the
Oh no,
uh,
you mean when I was writing about the 4th of July?
yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Well, no, well the first was the writing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, 245 years ago, and of course,
Okay.
compared to India, the U.S. is still a baby, you know. Uh,
Okay. Why do
but
you say so?
yeah, so that was that period, and many people, uh, many people of color have a lot of trouble with the 4th of July because for the African Americans there was no emancipation on the 4th of July; they were slaves, and Asian immigrants were treated poorly, and people believed in the U.S. Constitution, the way the laws were written, but the 4th of July was not a day of independence for many people. And I've become aware of that. There was a famous African American activist in the 1800s. His name was Frederick Douglass, and he spoke very eloquently of that, the fact that his people were not free to enjoy their independence on that day. It was just another day of servitude.
Wow. So one of our editor actually of the book, that is the Fleeting Visitor, is here with us. And she's posted a question here. When did you write your first poem?
Oh, my first poem? Well, the one I mentioned when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was okay. Okay. Now, you shared that except writing, you have a passion for photography. Is that true? Like, what do you enjoy photographing? Like, do you nature or there are different forms of interest? So I'm just putting it across.
Well, for a terrible photographer, I certainly take a lot of pictures. In fact, yesterday when I was trying to prepare for this session, my cell phone locked me out and said, "You don't have any more iPhone storage," because I had several thousand photos. So I madly started subtracting things. But okay, so I have two large photo albums and then many others. The big ones, one is this year we're sheltering in place. We're home so much. We have a big garden. I said, I want to photograph the whole garden through every month of the year. So I've done 9 months now, and I have about, I don't know, 60 pages and 200 pictures showing every little thing when it comes up. And it's kind of helped us amuse ourselves during sheltering in place. And the second thing, a dear friend whose first name is Elsha, a Dutch name, which means a noble woman, which she is, uh, started sending me pictures of food. Oh, this is what we had for dinner. And I never took pictures of food before, but I started sending her some pictures. And she's a much superior cook. I mean, since then we've cooked together, and she's a much better cook than I. But I'm the cook in the house, and she's the cook in her house, although her husband has been known to do some cleanup at times. And we started cooking together, and she has a wide range of things. I cook mostly Chinese stir fries, and so we both have got a little we were bored with cooking every day, and we were both very happy to learn from each other. So we've got an unpublished volume 1 of our it's not really a cookbook, it's a food journal. And so that's probably, now we're well into volume 2, and we're both deriving a lot of benefit from that. uh, and then I do little things like I did a little montage on my wife playing the piano with her son on the viola, with her daughter at the keyboard, with her grandson who still has his hair uncut. No. He got his hair cut after 14 months. I didn't mean
Okay.
to.
Okay.
But
So we
so
have
this,
your granddaughter saying that she has to quit now, but it was been thank you for the inspiration, wonderful interview and poetry. That's what
you,
she's saying right now.
you know, to if I may, actually to close, I do have two Alzheimer's poems to share, if I may. I think there are a few minutes.
No, we have time. We can
Ah,
still talk. I have a few subjects. Firstly,
go
uh,
ahead,
yeah,
please.
you can. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you. I had a very specific question here. That did you write to give life to certain relationships other than your wife? Means did which you felt the lag of certain relationships that you might have cut off from or left behind, so did you write to give life to those relationships? That is something which I was really wanting to know from you, from what I read through your work.
Well, um, you know, family and friends are the important relationships. I have written poems, various poems to family members and to good friends, highlighting some of the things I enjoy about them or notice about them. And so I wrote, that's a kind of recurring theme. Now, I don't have any old girlfriends that I'm writing about, no.
Okay. Yeah, but at that point of time, you didn't have any way of storing your relationships with you, like how we have Facebook today, or reconnecting with people or those who you've left behind. So I
Yeah.
really felt that maybe you. I was just curious, you started writing at the age of 12. So it seems I started writing at the age of 17, but still at the age of 12 is wow, it's a really young age to begin writing. And I was just curious what inspired you, what prodded you to just pick the pen up and begin writing. The children at that age and the people who are 12 have much better things to do than write. you
Yeah.
know. So
Well,
I was very curious.
I certainly did all the usual things. I'm a poor athlete, but I love sports, and I played different sports. Baseball and football, and I rode crew in college, and I enjoyed everything, but I was quite bad at all of it. It didn't deter me, of course, but but I had plenty of activities, and every day after school we usually play basketball or football, whatever the season was, or swim. But like I thought about relationships, and the short poem at age 12 was thinking about my grandmother who lived with us, and I have thought a lot about my parents, but I don't feel ready to write about them yet. I don't have a handle on where I would go, how I would. They're both so multifaceted. My sister-in-law, who actually worked for my father 50 years ago, found a poem she wrote for him almost 50 years ago, and her inspiration and her message was very different than what I would write about him. So it's interesting. Um, we all have a lot of faces we present to the world, and a writer has a lot of modes we can use, a lot of different thoughts. I think what impresses me is passion. In high school, one of my bad long poems was written about the UN diplomat Dag Hammarskjöld. I thought this man
Okay.
was amazing, and I wrote a 3-page poem that was just deadly when I found it recently. But it was moved by this man and what he did for the world, and so I'm impressed by passion. And I remember walking around college. Near our college, there are some homes for elderly people, and sometimes they would be sitting out on their balcony or outside, and I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be so old and wrinkled and sitting there on the balcony as the world passes you by. And I wrote a couple of really bad poems about that as well. But
So
passion,
there
there's
is
something that has to grab me.
so there is a form of poetry. It's called clerihu. I don't know whether you're familiar. It comes from the person who invented it. So the poem that form basically deals with talking about a person or observing a person, at the same time making fun of that person in a very light and very acceptable way. From what you just shared, that you'd written a poem about a UN diplomat, I believe that's what I might be wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
So coming
That
back to yes, so I just wanted to know, as a publisher, what is it that you liked in the two books that we published? Is there anything specific that you'd like to point and tell us that we can improve upon, or maybe you liked both would be welcome.
First of all, visually, your books are beautiful, and
Yeah.
and you want to jump in. It's many books of poetry I've seen just have a a sepia cover and a sepia back, and there's not a picture in it, and it's very stark, and you really have to concentrate. You just want to jump into this. It's like a swimming pool full of inviting water, and you jump in and start reading. I think A Fleeting Visitor, I probably read a third of it when I went out to get the mail before I walked back in the house.
Okay,
So
that's a
so
big compliment. Thank
it was
you.
lovely. Yeah. I think you put it together. The way you highlight some of the writers is very nice, and I'm sure much appreciated by them. And there's a range, and you deal with feelings and important ideas, and you seem to welcome what people are bringing to offer.
Thank
Yeah, so
you.
I think that's really clear that there's an openness to the volume that, as I see it. So I just appreciate what you do.
Thank you. So to conclude, you were saying that okay, it's, I was going to tap on the Alzheimer's bit. If you'd like to share something about your experiences about dealing with Alzheimer's, if you'd like to share, is
A
that
little, sure, of course. First of all, my wife is, besides beautiful, brilliant, and very quiet, and she doesn't. Her many intellectual gifts, she offers it in her work, but she doesn't talk. She is the last one to talk about herself, and maybe it's part of Chinese wisdom, and there. But she's very gifted musically, in her thoughts, and she has. I wrote a poem about her, which I don't have in front of me. There were two poems that I wanted to write for my wife that started me writing again a year ago, really October of last year. Two topics. One was I wanted to write a poem called Slipping Away. to show that my wife, with all her skills and wonderful ways and lovely personality and brilliance, so much to offer, that it was slipping away. Like I used the metaphor of a waterfall, water pouring down into a Norwegian fjord. That you can, it's beautiful, but it's draining out, and that I can't cup it or catch it. That I wanted to write that poem really badly. The second one was, my wife is very gifted at she's very aware of people, and she loves people, and she forgives people, which I sometimes don't do. She has a great understanding of the forces that drive people, and she understands where people are really coming from. And I wrote a poem about that I also don't have in front of me. One of the early ones is The Lady of Perfect Pitch. So perfect pitch is a musical term for maybe 1 in every 2,000 people. Doesn't need any reference notes around the note. They can tell you, oh, that's B sharp or whatever it is. I'm not musical, but they can, and these people have an advantage if they're musicians. They know. I mean, if I've listened in on our daughter and my wife do voice lessons, which it's all been virtual for the last year, and they're always on key. And once in a while, the instructor invites me to join in. And to me, I sound great, but apparently I've never yet been on key. But my wife has the gift of perfect pitch in relationships. She doesn't take people to task or blame them. She said, they're having a bad time. They're having difficulty understanding what's going on with their father. Whatever it is, she is an interpreter of the people around her, and that she's always had, and she still has even now. She can read me like a book. We're just driving down the street, and she says, what's bothering you? But of course, wives do that, I guess.
Accepting you as you are and accepting people as they are. And I'm musically literate, so I can relate with it is all to do with the feeling, and it just flows out of you when you're into it, and it asks you that okay, just go to the keys and start playing. That's how I end up doing it, and I truly understand, and that's why I brought it up, because the fact that how people and how people deal with each other is the most important aspect, and rather than just blaming the other person for not having done something. Simpler to do blame than to accept, okay, this person is like this, so let us accept it. I've dealt with that, so I relate with that. And it's beautiful when you accept that person as they are. In fact, I even floated a form on Submittable recently which deals with patients with cancer, and it's on right now, and I had the opportunity to even publish a poet who deals with brain tumor. Some of them deal with epilepsy, and there are few who other deal with migraine issues and lots of medical issues. They express it in their bios that this is what we are dealing with, and I feel that okay, I'm here and I'm encouraging them to not look at the limitations, but what those limitations, what advantage those limitations are bringing in to your life. And you know, Mark, what the irony is when I read about you, you stress so much on your relationships, including and more so with your wife. And it seems like this thing about Alzheimer's is again a kind of a return back gift to you in a form. Okay, when you have really, really stressed so much on relationships, you'll love to experience this and enjoy it to the fullest. That's my way of uh, looking at it. You know what I feel and what I gathered from what you shared with me. So, if you may, you can recite the two poems that you were wanting before we
I,
conclude the show.
I would love to. Thank you. It's such an honor, and it's so much fun interacting with you at this. You are teaching me a lot just as we sit here.
Oh, I'm not teaching you a lot. You're way elder than me to for me to teach you. I'm learning so much from you whilst I'm listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, two poems then, and I will conclude. This is called She and Me and Alzheimer Make Three. Ancient 6-cup blender churns out smoothies for a daily boost of calories. She pauses, walking through the kitchen, can't say, let's fill the blender, or where's my smoothie? She only says, I want to, and pauses. She doesn't point or show frustration, but when I say, is it the dishwasher? She smiles and shakes her head. Is it something about dinner? That dear one shakes her head again. Is it something on the kitchen counter? And she nods. Our item by item enumeration reaches the blender, and we nod together and walk toward it together. All I know for sure, she cannot say, it's the blender. Cannot say, shall we make smoothies? So I say it. It's time for the next batch. We're out of smoothies. And we team up to measure, scoop, and pour. And she taste tests and says, it's sweet. With a smile, itself sweet. Though a little wan, a little regretful. I pour out the bounty into the waiting containers, and she puts them in the refrigerator after I pat the right shelf, and the 5-minute task is done. But my heart, too, has poured out some of its blended contents, saddened by proof of more loss, more words passing from her ken, another statement she can no longer pronounce. Exactly when we lost the word blender and the word smoothie, I don't know. All I know is it was done as smooth as a smoothie fresh from the blender, though done more silently. We all become silent when Alzheimer stops by, bringing his house gift of loss, blended with rue and woe. And my last poem is 2 parts. And the first part is Where We Are is the title, and her perspective. I offered my love a little notebook as she looked for a scrap of paper to write down a task. I offered my heart the cute notebook, cover designed by a friend and printed for sale, but a gift to me, and perfect, I thought, for the small task my wife, my mainstay, needed to record her tiny list. She studied it, smiled sadly, shook her head, and said, that time for me is gone. And the
Wow.
last half of that is, of course, his perspective. And this will be my closing bit of poetry. And I'm just so excited, pleased, and honored to have the choice to visit with you and to talk with my own voice and thank you again. And I'll say my last bit. His perspective. Tell me, oh my, oh tell me, oh why, I must live and she must die. Don't say she'll leave, don't say we'll grieve anything we'd give life's hands to weave a safe and tranquil dell. We'd ring every bell, if fates forgive, in joy we'd dwell, if she'd be well, if she'd be well. Tell me,
Thank
oh
you, Mark.
my, oh tell me, oh why, I must live and she must die.
Thank you, Mark. Those were really beautiful words to conclude our show. I thank everyone who attended this show today. There was one Irene. I am not sure. She wrote a long message for you up here. Irene writing, here to go, but thank you so much for sharing your beautiful words, Uncle Mark. Thank you to Poet's Choice for this wonderful interview. I truly enjoyed it. And I thank you for such a wonderful event. And namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.